Hello, welcome, Aglaée.
Hi, Talia. So happy to be here with you today.
Thank you for joining me. So we're talking about all the things food, nourishment, digestive health, and maybe we can start with you telling us a little bit about how you even became interested in this topic.
Yes, that's an interesting. Yeah, at the age of 15, I decided I wanted to be a registered dietitian, but not for exactly the right reasons. Already there, I could feel the pressure of society to have my body look a certain way. And I thought, okay, if I become an RD, a registered dietitian, then I'll have all the answers and we'll have the body and the shape and size that it's supposed to be. And my life will be good.
Sort of this like,
So that's where the journey started. So already with a lot of ideas and beliefs about food, nutrition, body image, and expectations, especially for women and the way that we look. But anyway, so I got started on that journey and took many different directions. Worked in the field of education for people with type 2 diabetes a lot, and even then, like what was interesting is that we use the Canadian diabetes guidelines, which whether your audience is familiar with them or not, like they're what they are. They're on a model where yeah, I don't want to get into that too much, but yeah, it's not the most optimal for people with type 2 diabetes to eat this way. And I started losing faith in food as medicine, and I quit everything, sold everything I owned, and went backpacking and traveling in South America, as anybody would do now.
so
I'm
many
even
of us have that in our story, right? Like, it's funny.
yeah. So yeah, I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my career at this point. And well, I got my answer on my trip, and it's so interesting. When we travel, we become so much more open-minded to and learning from different cultures. And especially what I think is interesting, as a registered dietitian, we're taught that we're the authority on nutrition, and that we shouldn't listen to that we know everything, and anything that doesn't come from an RD is like, you just put that in the trash. Uh, but as I was traveling and as I was really reconsidering what I wanted to do with my career, I just started noticing a lot of different things, and even learning about paleo at that time, and just listening to podcasts I would have never listened to before. And when I came back after a few months of that trip, I started experiencing digestive issues, and I had the gut feeling that I had a parasite or something, and it was right. And even after treating the parasite, my gut was just messed up, and things were not the same. And I started, even though in my training as a registered dietitian, we learn about digestion, of course, but it's more for Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel diseases, and a bit about IBS, but it's like just very general, like food. It's like there's no emphasis on how different changes to diet can be helpful for those conditions, for any kind of digestion condition, which is kind of mind boggling to me, because what part of our body is more in contact with the food that we eat than our digestive system, right?
Yeah, it's so funny. Well, they'll say things like, "Well, yeah, food is important for health, but not for Crohn's disease."
Yeah.
Or, yeah,
What? Oh, and I've had so many clients telling me, like, their doctor just saying, like, yeah, the food doesn't impact IBS or Crohn's disease. Like, just don't change your diet. It's not worth it. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Not NDs usually, but
right. Yeah.
but even though, yeah, there was something inside of me that taught me that told me that food, there was something in food. And even though I wasn't taught exactly what I needed to be taught, I knew there was something there. And I started doing a lot of research and discovering a lot of things that were founded on science, but that was just not taught as part of dietetic school. So yeah, I started modifying my diet and started feeling better. It took some time, a lot of trial and error, but did kind of an elimination diet, and was able to heal myself and recover, and then start helping other people, and went on to writing my book, Digestive Health with Real Food. So that was not an interest that I chose, but it kind of found me. And yeah, through that, it just allowed me to help a lot of people struggling with similar issues. And on my own personal journey, there was still some disordered eating, as is very frequent just because of the pressure on women and also on men, or, you know, no matter how people identify on what our body should look like. But when we have health issues, like there's also additional pressure that, you know, you should eat, I mean, depend on what kind of people you hang out with. But in my field, like people who are really interested in health and nutrition, like there's a lot of pressure and expectation that you should do everything you can with diet. And if you're not feeling well, you're not trying hard enough. So anyway, so feeling that pressure and there was just a lot of thoughts about the should and shouldn't, and then my body weight not exactly fluctuating and not being always where I wanted it to be, and feeling that it was not in my control. And yes, so there was the path then took me on healing at deeper levels, at the mental level, emotional level, and spiritual level as well. So that's kind of the big eagle's viewpoint of my journey.
It's so interesting because so many of our patients or clients are also on that similar journey where it's like this intuitive sense of unwellness, but then somehow that gets translated or understood or just co-opted by society to be about body shape. And I think my journey started in a similar way, where it was this like, oh, you know, maybe there's a missing piece that I'm unaware of, or this food I need to take out, or this food I'm not eating, or something that will make me a size 2, or whatever it is that society tells us you should be. And it's like this, I think before we start recording, we're talking about this like equation that so many people hold implicitly, that body size equals health, or that a diet is about weight loss. And when we say diet, you know, and this is like defining the term, it's like a way of eating, an eating pattern, you know? Yeah. So like nutrition, or anytime you talk about food, there's this implicit understanding like, oh, it's about weight loss, and if I change my diet, I'm going to lose weight, or that's the goal, or that's the expectation, or that means I'm healthy. And it's insidious in the health, in the wellness industry, or in the nutrition industry.
It is.
And this is, how did you shift from that? So you said, like, I started off being interested in food because of this, like, wanting to be healthy, but then there was also this thing like, oh, I want to like lose weight, or it was this body image sort of thing that was driving it. How did that shift? Do you remember that turning point, or?
I think it was multiple moments. It was like steps and layers and deepening over time. But I think that I would say that even, you know, after writing my book, I had healed a lot of things at the physical level with my gut health, but then I still had the eating disorder, which was never, I never went to anyone for that, because as a registered dietitian, I thought that I I shouldn't have an eating disorder, and I couldn't have an eating disorder. And I was just trying to, even like when I was thinking about, okay, I will, you know, trying to come up with a plan for my diet, like I was like, it's just a way of eating. Like, it's not a diet, and it's for health. And like, we have like a lot of sneaky ways, even within ourselves, to talk about this. And even like in the advertising of different diets or ways of eating, like they advertise that as a lifestyle, but sometimes there is a deeper, it's it's just mixed with the expectation of weight loss and so many other things. It's very insidious, as you said earlier. But I just realized that I was still, even with better physical health, I just felt like there was something missing. I just had felt like that my whole life since being a teenager, that there was always something missing. And I realized, okay, maybe I have adrenal fatigue then, and I'll do the things to try to heal the adrenal fatigue, and then maybe I'll feel better. But there was always something missing. And I realized that this just inner storm of thoughts that I had in my head of all the should and shouldn't. It was not only about what I was eating, but all the thoughts and the fear and the guilt and shame that came with it that were actually draining me. And it led to, which I see, I've done myself and see in so many of the people that I work with, in this kind of going from one end of the spectrum to the other, where we try to restrict and be quote unquote good, which I don't like that term, or eating quote unquote healthy, or like doing the right things with our diet and the way that we eat. And then at some point, like just we just can't anymore, and something happens, we get triggered, there may be stress or whatever, something happens in our life, and we go to the other side of the spectrum and we eat our emotions, or it can show up as in any form that it can show up. But sometimes it can be overeating, using food for comfort. For other people, maybe other forms. But so I was just so tired to go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and even though people on the outside may not have known that it was happening, it was like a big part of my energy and my life force was going towards that, trying to manage that, trying to control that, and trying to hide that. And at some point it was just like, I can't anymore. Like and I just that was just a starting point where I felt like, my physical health is important, but without mental health, without emotional health, it's not actually health. I want holistic health. And I was used to the term holistic being about the whole body, but now it just started clicking that there's actually more than the body, that it went beyond that.
Yeah. It's so interesting, like when you're talking about disordered eating, like so much of it goes undiagnosed because it doesn't fit into the general category of anorexia, where there's this very low body weight. Like not everybody who is suffering mentally and consumed by ideas of food. I can totally relate. I remember maybe a decade ago thinking like, what would my brain be capable of if I wasn't thinking about what to eat and tracking calories and focus and doing that flip-flopping, and it being, like you said, in that head storm, the thought storm. It's like, oh my gosh, I could like win a Nobel Prize.
and just in the eating disorder, and not everybody, may have an eating disorder, although a lot of people have a form of disordered eating at some level in today's world. But even in the field of eating disorder, like weight has become like, it has made it's part of the diagnosis. And again, it's preventing a lot of people from getting the help that they need, because anorexia can show up in people of any body shape and sizes. Like it's really about the behavior. Like it's not why the behavior of anorexia is okay in someone that's in the larger body, but when you get to a certain body weight, then if you get too thin, then it's unsafe. But it's the same behavior, same thoughts. So it doesn't matter what type of body it presents in. Like it should be addressed, and those people should get help.
Yeah. And it's like, so many people are just like, oh, I think I had this pathological relationship with food, or this problematic relationship with food throughout my life. And I never got help because nobody really noticed or saw that, or I was able to hide it, like you said. And then this distinction with, when we think of like bulimia, where the characteristic, like the hallmark symptom is that you're purging, right? Like vomiting. But so many people are just restricting rather than purging, or exercising. And I think like sometimes, how our bodies genetically can respond to caloric restriction is to just like override our ability to control and then enter into a binge cycle. That was my case.
Survival. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Yeah. Where it was like, I was like, why am I binging? Why? And then the focus was on the binge behavior, not on restrictive behavior.
Which is just the result. It's not the cause. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like so many patients come in with like, I'm binging at night, and it's like, well, the thing for me for sure that ended any sort of binge eating was just eating enough.
Yes, I know. And and it's still really hard for people that have a complicated relationship with food to wrap their head around that, because they're afraid, well, it's just going to end up to me eating more food. Like I think that I'm just thinking of a client I've had this week, and but if I eat more during the day, I still end up binging. But it may take some time for your body to just feel a little bit more safe and secure that it's going to get the nourishment that it needs. And there's a lot of in today's world, it's just so easy to disconnect from our body and to mistrust our body, because we're taught to live in our head and to figure things out and to put things in the Excel spreadsheet. And yes, we can do that with food, but really at the end of the day, it's really staying connected to the body and trusting our bodies and our wisdom that's going to be the most beneficial and healthy in the long term.
And it's so scary because sometimes when we're still stuck in that cycle or that thought storm, it's like, well, my body's agenda may not be my agenda. Like I want to be a size 2, but my body wants to be bigger.
Yeah. Fighting against each other. Yeah.
And so to
Yeah.
really just let go and be like, okay, body, you take the reins and you tell me what you need and I'll listen. It's like jumping into an abyss.
Scary. Yeah.
How did you take that? Like, what did that process look like for you? Just curious.
You have big questions for me. How did it look like for me? It looked very messy. It was not a linear path. It was very like spiral-like and coming back to what felt like the same place over and over again. But, just always like a spiral staircase coming at it from a higher perspective every time. But for me, it was just like, I just recall the moment standing in my kitchen and having binged and like feeling, you start to feel the discomfort physically. And then the thoughts start to come in like, why did you do that? You have no self-control. You're going to be fat and blah, 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 blah. It's even worse than that in our heads, but I'm not going to show that here. But everybody can know what I'm talking about. And then I was like, okay, like it feels like I'm not able to stop the binge, and just those thoughts is just adding oil on the fire. And it's like, okay, I read all of these books about compassion and being more gentle with ourselves. And I just started applying compassion. Like, yeah, of course, like you've had this happen and that was very triggering to you. And it's okay. I understand if you needed to eat to feel a little bit better, even though we know it's just like very temporary. It's okay. And just starting softening, because I find that in the diet world, it's all about, being more hardcore and control. And it's very rigid. It's more, like if we talk about the masculine versus feminine energy, not about gender, everybody has masculine and feminine energy within them. But in the diet world, it's more of that masculine energy. And again, it's not saying anything bad about men, or like it's more of a kind of a, masculine, they're both the masculine and the feminine gives us gifts, and when there's harmony between the two, it all helps us feel like we can make choices and decisions that are aligned with our highest and greatest good. But for the most part, with the diet mentality, it's really black or white. It's really like you should do this and not deviate from that. It's very much about control. And I started adding more of that feminine energy of compassion and, okay, like trying to stay connected to my body, even through the experience. Like, yes, I'm feeling bloated, but instead of wanting to punish myself and do whatever kind of exercise, maybe what my body really needs right now is a hot water bottle, or I don't know, like, or just to rest, like, trying to soften. And I think it was just trying, I think that one of the pivotal point of my journey was learning how to reintegrate that feminine energy and more softness and compassion, which I have pushed aside for a long time because I was really in that go drive mode, like get those diplomas, get the career, even for my healing journey, and write the book, and all of these things. So more softness, interestingly enough.
Right. It's like, I think it's a great distinction, because you think of like the sort of masculine energy of like measurement and structure, which means like I'm gonna eat according to a plan and depend, and this understanding like every single day I need the same amount of calories, which is just doesn't make sense from our body's perspective. And then switching to a more like just flowing sort of energy, softening, and okay, let me just listen and kind of lean back a bit and not be in the driver's seat so much and just see what happens. Again, super scary.
Really scary. I had read about intuitive eating, but I just felt like it was not for me, like, because I didn't feel like I had an intuition. So this was kind of, and now I am eating intuitively, and I feel really connected to my body, and it's easy for me to know what will feel right in my body. and to use food for the right reasons. But yeah, there was this transition period where, you know, it doesn't have to be black and white. Again, you know, we're very used, okay, you do intuitive eating or you don't do it. But yeah, there are, you know, there are nuances. There's a whole spectrum of color in between, and just taking one little step to bring a bit more softness and compassion, I think can, as scary as it sounds, bring a bit more trust. And as you keep walking on this path, there's even more trust, a better connection gets created between you and your body. And yeah, it deepens and it strengthens.
Right. And that just accumulates more trust as you're like, okay, this is working out. It's okay. Everything's not falling apart. My wildest fears are not coming true. Things are okay. It's like this idea, like, I think this may be a philosophical thing to say, but I feel like we're scared of nature and the animalistic tendencies within us. So this idea of like, I will like, the cupcake will become like a heroin, you know, and everything will just spiral, and I won't be able to say no, and I won't be able to stop, and it'll just take me and then ruin my entire life, and everything will fall apart, my health and everything. Versus the body's an animal that has an intuitive wisdom that knows what it needs and knows what nourishment it needs and how it survives. And it, for millions of years, has learned how to survive and how to choose the right foods and this whole thing. And it's complicated when we think of the, like, you know, the what we call the Franken foods that are meant to override that intuition.
Yes. Yeah, that makes it more complicated for sure. Yeah.
But I think that, you know, with you know, let's say natural quote unquote foods, or just, you know, food, actual food.
Yeah.
that there is this balancing effect where it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
can get
I am
reacquainted.
satiated. Yes.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah. So it's like, and when you were talking about this fear, so it's like we want to feel like we're in control, even though we never really are, but we feel like we are. And that's why I noticed in myself and in so many of the people that I've worked with is that in times of stress, you know, whatever the stress may be in their career, in their relationships, in their parenting or whatever, then sometimes it can be either like binge eating or emotional eating, or the opposite, or sometimes both, or wanting to control more, like, you know, I'm going to go on a diet. And sometimes people cannot even realize, but it's actually like something that make them feel that like they were not in control, that may make them want to go on that next diet, or perhaps I should try this whatever plan, and just try to gain control over at least one part of our life.
Right. Yeah. It's like nothing in my life is, I remember that. And that's such a common thing of like, everything's falling apart in my life. There's lots of stuff going on, but at least I am eating within my caloric limits. And like, at least I have control over that. And it's such an absurd thing, but it's a part of our psyche of wanting control, like you said.
Yes, exactly. So I think, it's important to realize that, because then we're using that as a crutch, and we'll keep falling into that same cycle over and over again. And I think underneath that there's something that needs to be addressed, and other ways to look at this fear, whether it's uncertainty or fear of being rejected or fear of not being loved, or to see, you know, is going on a diet really what's gonna help me? And perhaps, or eating your emotion, perhaps it does help temporarily, but if we keep falling into those same habits and patterns, then the deeper root is not being addressed, then we just stay stuck, and we always feel like there's something missing. So I know it takes courage, and we don't always know how, but just opening ourselves to that possibility of knowing that there might be something deeper there that needs my attention is the first step.
And like when you said like the spiral staircase is a beautiful analogy, because you're like, it wasn't just like a boom, oh, I figured it out, I'm done. Like constantly circling.
I wish.
Or the opposite. And I think it's a really great point too, is that so much of what we think, we want to latch on to the material thing, right? Like the food or the body.
Tangible. Yeah.
The tangibles, exactly. Whereas underneath, there's an underlying fear, an existential fear of like, well, if I'm not the right size, I won't be loved. And then that can be reinforced wherever you look. Oh my gosh, that message is everywhere, right? And that's part of like encouraging us to stick with diet culture and stick with like consumer culture too.
Yeah, buying whatever products they,
Yeah. But
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about intuitive eating.
Uh-huh. I know there it's intuitive eating, like there's a certification for that, and there are books that have been written by Evelyn Triboli, which is awesome, but I'm not certified in that. Like I found my own way, which is not better or not. I guess it's just different. It's just it was felt what felt intuitive to me. But for a lot of that, there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen, and looking at those beliefs that are getting in the way. Like, okay, like, do I really need? Is it really true that I need to be at a certain size to be loved and to be accepted and to be to be willing to question those beliefs? And then I think that the most important thing is to practice connecting with the body. And again, it's not something we can learn in a book. Like, okay, I'm going to read about connecting with the body or intuitive eating, and now I just do it. Like, it's just like, you can learn in a book how to swim or how to ride a bike, but until you get in the lake or on the bike, that's when you're going to really, it's going to be a very different experience. So it's the same with connecting with the body. And it's, for me personally, it couldn't be like a rigid approach because I had had enough of that. So it needed to be more flowy. And it was just about paying attention. Okay, so this is how I'm feeling right now after eating this way. And just, yeah, practicing connecting with the body, because I think that for a lot of people in today's world, we're used to dissociating and disconnecting from our body and living in what feels like the safety of our mind. And it's very common for me to ask to my clients, okay, so like they tell me they ate that, and I ask them like, and how did it feel in your body? And they cannot even tell me because we're just either so used to feeling the discomfort, or we're just used to not feel it, to not feel anything. So, and that can feel scary because there might be good reasons for which some people dissociate from their body or haven't felt safe to be in their body. But healing that relationship that we have with our body and trying to listen to our body as we would listen to a child. And just, for me, I became a mom and just, was still very young, but just thinking like, if, he ate like a big thing of cookies and had a sore tummy, like how would I speak to him? I wouldn't like shame him, or I wouldn't, so just trying to bring that softness and really practicing coming down to my body. And there are a lot of different practices that can help that, but yoga was also very, very helpful for me. And finding a studio where there were no mirrors, where I could really be an experience that could be embodied and from the inside, and starting to feel into those different parts of my body and feel safer and safer. And so it's really connecting and reconnecting, because there are always things that are going to take us a little bit away from the body when we need to be in our mind thinking, but coming back to the body as a practice.
I love this idea of the relationship. Like a relationship can drift apart, and it's always about like pulling it back. Like, let's have a date night. Date night with
I love
body.
that. Bubble bath and everything.
I love
and for those wondering, like, oh my God, I've been like so mean and harsh and hard on my body. Like, I would just want people to know that the body will never hold grudges, and it's not like a next or whatever. Like the trust can always be regained. And it's just a matter of calling and building that connection.
Right. It's like we haven't spoken for a few years, but I'm just reaching out to see how you're doing. I love
Exactly.
I love the analogy, with the child. And I think I've had this conversation with patients before where they're like, I don't know what to eat, or I don't know what to do, or I'm in this like roadblock, like, do I eat ice cream? Do I not eat ice cream? It's like, well, imagine that, you're dealing with a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old comes up to you and says like, hey, I want to eat some ice cream. Like, what would you take into consideration? You take into consideration like, okay, well, like we're just about to have dinner, so maybe like let's have our dinner, and then afterwards you can have ice cream, or okay, yeah, great, let's have some, let's go out. It's like exactly how you would deal with a 4-year-old.
It's not as complicated then, like there's not so many rules, right? It's just
Totally. It's a response. And the 4-year-old's probably not going to finish an entire pint of ice cream, but might. And it's like, then there's a curiosity there of like, oh, I wonder, why he or she is so hungry, or maybe they're growing, or maybe they've spent a lot of energy. Like it's it's more of this like, oh, why is that
More
happening?
curiosity and less judgment, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. It does kind of simplify things where you're just like, oh, because we are like
You're
deconditioning.
not so in it also. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Within like, so when the patients or the clients are saying like, oh, I don't really know what I'm feeling. What steps are then taken, or like what kind of things do you help bring them into?
Well, I think that usually, I think that they just become aware that they were not aware. So I think that's a percent like, oh, right. How, this is actually weird that I don't even know how I was feeling. And
What do you mean how I was feeling? Am I supposed to know? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that it's just realizing that, I can know a lot of things about food and be there to help them, but I'm not in their body. And, so I'm really, my role when working with people is to empower them and allow them to take their own power back. And like, they can actually, I want to say figure it out, but it's not really figure it out because it's not really of the realm of the mind, but it's more like they can feel it. They can actually feel it themselves. And of course there are some knowledge and some wisdom that can help with that. But really, like, I don't, when clients come to me, I don't know. I cannot know exactly what their body needs. And that's why it has to be a teamwork, and their responsibility is to start becoming willing to feel what it feels to be like in their body and how food makes them feel.
Yeah, because you could just say like, "Oh, yoga helps me," but someone's relationship to yoga could be completely different, and use yoga as a way to just further the thought storm.
The shooting and all.
Right, yeah. Especially like, okay, this is the way that I'm gonna, achieve this like underlying goal that I still haven't let go of, and I think a really difficult topic for me. So I obviously work with nutrition too as an ND, and I know that you too like will prescribe nutrition plans, therapeutic plans, and so there is this diet or these recommendations. Yeah. And then we're also so maybe we can speak a little bit about that of like, if somebody's coming in with IBS or has a health condition and we're trying to look at food as a potential cause or aggravation of that condition, and we're trying to heal someone with food versus buying into, because it's really hard to separate ourselves from that whole diet culture and that shame. And and
black
so
and white. Yeah, right.
Totally. And so like saying, okay, let's take out gluten for a month, sometimes just feeds that whole thing.
Yeah.
But it might be necessary to investigate that. So maybe we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting, like I would say I have a lot of my clients are people that have read my book, let's say, or have gone on a lot of elimination diets. And sometimes they read like, okay, if eliminating gluten may be helpful, and they read somewhere else that maybe dairy and FODMAPs, and they decide to, the more the better kind of approach. So that they're left with eating like just a few foods. So a lot of my clients are like that. So for them, it's really about making the approach actually less rigid. And for them, it becomes like so liberating to just have someone, instead of them having to figure out what to cut out, like I just create something customized for them that actually usually feels gives more expansion to their diet. But other people that, maybe starting on the path or have kind of new health issues, or it's new for them to look at food as medicine, and perhaps they eat more of a standard American diet, then it's a different thing. And they may have different experiences with quote unquote dieting, or their relationship to their weight in their body. So and I think that for usually I try to not, even though I know there might be gluten, there might be dairy, and there might be FODMAPs, and there might be a ton of other things, but trying to simplify it as much as possible and see where they're starting at, and I really, in the past, like many years ago when I was still in my disordered eating pattern, I was more hardcore. Like, you need to eliminate all of these things to get faster results, which can work, but then if it compromises the mental health, like, so it really needs to be assessed. And there are some people that it work for, but for people that I can feel that their relationship with food, with their body, maybe a bit complicated, then a very gentle, slow approach, and having a lot of gentleness. Like, let's say we just cut out gluten for a month and they have social event and they end up eating cupcakes or whatever. Like, it's really about not blaming, shaming, pointing fingers, but trying to turn that into a learning experiment. And okay, so how did that feel for you? And trying to allow them, because I don't want them to eat this way to please me. Like, that's really not the point. It's really for them to find how their body works. Like, there is no manual written for my body, for their body, but it's like, it's how we learn about our body. And so really framing it in that way. And I don't know if I'm answering the question, but that's what came.
Totally. Like, because it can be sticky. I have so many patients, or you read so many case reports where somebody took out gluten or whatever food it was, and they're like, within 3 days my joint pain went away, and all of a sudden my mood lifted. Within a month I was like a completely different person. I wasn't having these depressive spirals. I wasn't getting migraines anymore. And so you hear that as a clinician, you're like, okay, like, this needs to happen. We need to take out gluten, or and then on the other arm, somebody could be may not return to your office with this, like, this wound that was opened or created of like, oh, I can't do this, or I can't eat this way, or this is actually aggravating this internal sense of, like, either of us with these underlying eating disorders that we may have formed during teenage years, of like, well, this is just reopening that wound, and and I don't really understand why this recommendation's been given, and I feel shame around it because I ate a cupcake and she told me not to, and I can't go back and see her, and there's a whole thing. And as a clinician, we might not be aware of all that going on, as we're developing a relationship with the patient.
So what I'm seeing as you're talking about this, like, I think it's really important to take the time before talking about food and nutrition to inquire about that relationship with their food and nutrition, which is usually part of my intake, like my initial questionnaire, because I think that really guides how I'm going to respond, what the recommendation is going to be. But I think that just bringing some awareness to that, because it's just it's not about the what. Like, a gluten-free diet can work perfectly well for another one, and for another one, it may be what makes them not want to come back ever again. Like, it's really about everything that's hiding underneath. And I think that's with food, like with emotional eating, like, food is really not the problem. Food is really the symptom. And for a lot of these things, yes, food can be medicine, but there's just so much stuff underneath it that we need to unpack. I mean, we cannot unpack it all, but just being aware of that, and being willing to dig a little bit.
Like, doing some screening around it. That's the thing. It's like, food is a very loaded topic, and you can see that even in nutrition spaces, like plant-based versus keto versus carnivore. There's like emotions.
It becomes very,
right. It's like, it becomes almost like dogma in some spaces. I think what's been helpful for me over years in working with food is really, like, yes, like what you're saying, screening for sure. Really saying, okay, I'm going to have you track your food for a week. How does that feel? Like, what's your experience with food tracking, because many people have been given weight loss as a treatment many times with healthcare practitioners, and that's a big trigger. But to also frame it as like, okay, so, because I feel like I need to share with you that taking out gluten or whatever it is could be helpful. I don't want to hold back because of my own biases, this potential treatment that could make all the difference for you. But also framing it as an experiment. Like, we're going to take it out for a month. We're going to see if you eat it, or so the goal is that we're going to reintroduce, because the reintroduction is just as important, if not more.
You can learn so much from it.
And often we skip that part because we just stuck on the elimination, and like that, as soon as someone like says, okay, take this food out, sometimes we can, we stop listening, right? Or we get overwhelmed by that thought, and then we forget, okay, it's actually going to come back in a month or 2 weeks or whenever. And if it comes back in earlier, you get invited to a birthday party and there are these sweet cupcakes. Is that, like you said, paying attention, just observing, because there you go. That's the reintroduction, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
and
okay,
even though they may not have done the elimination for the proper amount of time, like I don't think that a lot of people like, does that they have to start over again? Like for them, like it's like the counter being reset to 0 and they have to start from scratch and it erases everything they've done so far. And yes, it might be, if gluten is a problem, there might be some inflammation and some damage. But yeah, just to me, it doesn't erase anything. Like we're still moving forward, whatever happens, as long as we learn from it.
Totally. Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, if you've been like, you know, I don't know, like if your arm's been being banged by a hammer and then you stop and it's like, well, we should stop for a month before we bang the hammer again to just see what, you know, what the result is of this hammer banging. After 2 weeks, you can still notice a difference. Like you're still going to get some relief. And then with the reintroduction, you're going to see, you know, if there's an issue. And I think, yeah, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I can't go back and see Aglaée or Talia because I ate a cupcake and it's ruined, and, you know, or I haven't started. And then this idea of being curious with that too, of like, okay, so maybe this isn't the right thing. Like, you know, like you said, it's like, I'm not an expert on you. So if I'm saying take out bread, but you're, you know, you're feeling overwhelmed by that, or intuitively, you know, that that's not the right thing for you, then you're the boss.
Yes. I think that, for a lot of people still, they're used to the healthcare practitioner being the authority, and depends on the generation, like maybe not so much in younger generations, but in some generation, they just want to do what they're being told sometimes, or sometimes they just, pretend and they go and rebel and do the exact opposite. But there's just a lot of different ways that people can respond.
It's interesting. Actually, I was reading something about there's, you know, the guilt with like, why I ate the wrong thing. There's the guilt of going back to your healthcare provider and saying, oh, I didn't do it. And then there's also the guilt of missing out, like the FOMO. So everyone's at a party and the guilt of like, well, if I don't have some cake, I'm gonna be out of this. You know, I'm gonna
feel like an outcast. And it's so interesting.
There's a lot of stuff driving that. So it's not like a clean process. It's not like taking your car to the mechanic and they're like, oh, it just needs more oil.
Oh my God. Yeah. The body is very complicated, and everything that goes around it, like real life, adds so many different layers around it too.
Maybe we can talk about food as nourishment, because this is a concept that we don't often really like unpack, I guess, you know, and maybe you can, because that is really your platform, like your
my message.
Your message, exactly.
Yeah. For me, I made the switch of, I don't use the word nutrition all that much, and I use the word nourishment, which to me evokes something deeper, more connected, less about numbers and labels, less rigid, and much more, even like, what is nourishment? Like, it's even hard to define. Like, it's and to me, nourishment is not about a set of rules. It's like feeling nourished is something that we can feel in our body. And perhaps some people may not even know what it feels like. And I've had some clients telling me that, like, I've been reading, you know, for months and months of you talking about nourishment and feeling nourished. And I was like, I'm not sure what she's talking about. And then one day it's like, oh, okay, I feel it. Like, I feel nourished. And I talk about nourishment at all levels, not only in the body at the physical level, but also in the mind and the heart and the soul, like, because really taking all of these parts of ourselves, because we have a body, but we're not our body. We're so much more than that. And really, we cannot have health if we're not healthy in all of these parts of us. And nourishment is really, in my experience and opinion, the best way to get there. And to me, nourishment for the body, it's just, you know, when I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to have for breakfast this morning? We're recording this in the morning. Like, what is going to nourish me? For me, I know that my body does better when I have a good amount of protein for breakfast and some carbs. So, and healthy fats. So that's what I have. And someone asking themselves this question, what will nourish me for breakfast this morning? They may have no clue, and that's okay too. Like wherever we're at, this is a journey and I'm still learning. There is no end destination, but it's really about practicing connecting and practicing feeling, okay, was this breakfast like I don't know, whether breakfast cereal and milk, was this really nourishing? If, an hour after I'm craving sugar, or I feel like I have a blood sugar crash, or that, So just paying attention to that, to how food makes you feel. And to me, feeling nourished, it's like feeling grounded, feeling safe in our body, which I think that, it's, and I'm even thinking about, okay, how would I explain that to me like 10 years ago, when I had to me, nutrition was all about numbers and rules and black and white. And it's, it's just something to, I think, to people that maybe like, I don't know what she's talking about, just know that there is something else that perhaps you haven't experienced, and that can help bring a lot more peace and calm and groundedness and freedom, because when we get to that place, there's not so much of that mental chatter back and forth. Oh, I should eat it, I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that, how much, when, and trying to control everything. And it's just like a big sigh.
This feeling of I'm safe, I'm home, like I'm
right, home. I like that. Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah. When you said that, like, how would I explain this to myself 10, 15 years ago? I'm thinking of myself in like third year biochem after like a 2-hour swim where I just had some protein bar. And I'm like, what would I tell myself? I think it's hard. Like, I think what my questions were at that time, because you do have this internal sense of something's not quite right, but I'm doing what I'm being told, and I'm reading the books, and it's not quite getting me to these deeper questions of nourishment and of intuition. And I don't know. I think I may have just listened to myself. Yeah. What would my questions have been? I think it would have been like, well, why do I feel maybe a reassurance, which I may not have accepted at that time.
No, exactly. Yeah, sometimes it's just part of the path to go through whatever we need to go through first, but
maybe like opening that up to
yes. We're planting a seed so that we don't have to suffer for so long.
Or just even asking maybe some deeper questions, like, so why did you want to swim for 2 hours? Was that fun? Did that feel good? What did that?
Because on the outside, it's like the society would be like, oh, why she's healthy, like she's doing the right thing, and you're being praised for it. But what is really hiding underneath that? Is there fear, insecurity? So
totally.
Being questioned, and having someone being willing to really look at what's underneath that, I think that could be really powerful.
Totally. And there's a couple other things too. So this idea of safety is really beautiful, because so many of us are in fight or flight, in this chronic adrenal overload, this adrenal expression, right? Like this cortisol high, either like we're making way too much cortisol, or we're not responding to the cortisol, we're overexhausting. And one of the ways that our body understands safety is through nourishment. And one of the easy, when we talk of nourishment, and we'll get more into this, is like the thoughts and the things that we consume, whether it be information or ideas, not just food, but food is this, has this signal from the environment of, oh, there's abundance here. We can stay in this area. We don't need to be anxious about hunting and finding food and
the next meal gonna be, or whatever.
Exactly. And so many of us, like if we're in a state of restriction or encouraged to restrict, there's this implicit message underlying that of like, the environment is not safe. There's not enough here.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, that just made me think of our relationship to hunger, which can be like sometimes like hunger, like is something that is kind of encouraged, like fight your body hunger. Like it's even in some of the messages, like you just fight the hunger, but that's actually
Mm.
a very, it's the body signaling the need for nourishment. And if we keep pushing that, ignoring that, then the body will not feel safe. And yeah, for me, so there was partly that, and there was also a time where I felt really scared of being hungry. I had been through that pattern on one end of the spectrum to the other of restriction and binging, that hunger. Like I was just scared of my own body, and yeah, as you said, bringing safety really calms the nervous system. And through nourishment, we can, yeah, nourishment is a very powerful way to help calm the nervous system, help the body feel safe. And interestingly enough, it helps at all of the levels, like mentally, emotionally, but even physically, like your body will function better. It will digest better. There will be less bloating if bloating is an issue. And yeah, the body will just regulate so much better when it's in this more peaceful, calmer state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this woman, Tabitha Farrar, who works with disordered eating. I don't know if you've heard of her. So she really talks about mind hunger, like mental hunger, as actually like a mechanism that is the body signaling more nourishment, especially after a period of very intense restriction, often, and like an overshoot of weight, so that the body can like, it's like, oh, finally I have some resources, I'm going to hold on to them so I can repair things that haven't been attended to, because I had to sort of triage priorities. It's kind of like being in debt for a while, you know?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
once you finally make some money, you're going to start saving it like mad, because you're like, I need all this stuff for a rainy day.
A little cushion.
Oh, again, you need a little cushion, exactly. And like physically and metaphorically. And she talks about, like, so we think intuitive eating kind of fits into this. It's so nuanced, because she's like, there is the physical sensation of hunger, and you're often told, and that's part of what, like, I haven't really dived into intuitive eating, because I was really turned off sometimes by that. Like, well, I don't, like, hunger is so different all the time. And sometimes I don't feel physically hungry, but then 2 hours later I'm feeling dizzy, and I clearly was. Or this idea of like, oh, it's in your, like, where hunger is, and it's like a gurgling, but that's not actually so. But she's like, this also, this mental hunger, this obsession with food, or this thinking about food all the time, is another signal from the body to eat, potentially, right? It's all about understanding that those signals. But because the actual physical sensations require energy, and if we don't have that energy, then the body's like, I'm not going to waste,
it will just numb those signals. That's
so like
interesting.
this, like, food obsession could just be a signal, and like we're told like, oh, that's wrong, or that's something pathological with that. But it was this very interesting idea of like, maybe that's just a cry for nourishment,
And as you said, like, it's so easy for us to get into our heads about so many different things in our lives, including food, that we just were disconnected from our body as we do that. And and when you talk about the financial, the analogy when you go into debt and then build that cushion, makes me think of that. I use this analogy with clients a lot, is like, imagine that when we're dieting, or when we're trying to control, restrict, like we're breathing through a straw. And then when we start expanding the diet and loosening things up, like, imagine that's that first big breath you can take after breathing through a straw. Like, of course, and that's when a lot of people get scared and go back to breathing through the straw, or wanting to control their breathing, so to speak, because it just feels out of control. But this is just, so many different analogies to talk about the same thing, like that there's wisdom to the body, and there's, it's in our genes, in our DNA to survive, and our body knows to adapt. And it's just, our body truly are doing the best that we can. And I think that it's time for more nourishment, so that our body can breathe more deeply and relax and trust that, and work with our body instead of against it. Like, that makes such a big difference. And even physically, visually, I can look at pictures of myself 10 years ago. And I just see like, even though I was aware of my posture, trying to have good posture, like there's more of that rounded shoulder, like more that protective, like, wanting to protect the heart, or it is just, you can see the tensions in the body. And right now I do feel like my body is more open and loose, and I feel more free in my own body. So yeah, it's really, pretty wild to notice all of that.
Like even just energetically just occupying the actual physical
instead of
presence,
wanting to hide and make yourself smaller.
Mm-hmm.
No, take all of the space you can take.
Right, totally. Yeah, and so there's so many energetic things around that, right? It's like just expanding and just being free within the body, like how much restrict our movements even, because it's like, oh, I shouldn't really exist,
Yeah.
It's big. And actually, I love that, like the big breath, and then the fear that comes with that. Like, whoa, how much oxygen am I gonna end up needing? Like, let's bring
So it's so interesting, and I think that for any listeners that may be like, oh my God, that's me, but there's so many people, and I just want to tell to the listeners, if that's you, you're not alone, and it's not your fault either, because nobody has taught you how to do that. Like, I wish that it should be even more important than maths and reading and whatever, to know how to connect with our body, to even know how our heart works, how to feel our feelings and emotional intelligence. But yeah, it's just, for now, the educational system is not built that way, but it's also never too late to learn. So this is, wherever you're at, it's okay. And the good news is that wherever you're at, you can move forward and build and create more trust and confidence and freedom with your body and within yourself as well.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder, like every nutrition class or health class should start with self-compassion.
Oh, wow. I love that. I still remember in third high school at 15 years old, because in Quebec, the educational system is different, but we're in biology class learning nutrition. Like, the first thing we learned about nutrition was counting calories.
Whoa.
What? And I've heard of so many people, that have kept counting the calories from that day, or feeling like they have to control their body, control how they eat. Like, it's just like, biology shouldn't be about counting calories. It should, anyway.
Well, I mean, like, there's so much around the calorie, and I want to just address it, because that's something that comes up again and again with patients, where it's like, well, this thing has to more, like, so full fat yogurt versus fat free. And it's like, well, I mean, there's so much in that, right? It's like, so one has less calories, but that the calorie, first of all, is not it's sort of like looking at your grades, at the end of a class, and be like, well, there's so much more that can explain a grade. Like, so we're evaluating a food based on a unit of measurement that really is like, I mean, it's about like how much a food increases the temperature of water when you burn it.
Basically, like, it doesn't tell anything about the quality, how it's going to feel in your body, how nourishing it will be for your body, and how nourishing it will be not only for your body, but for your mind, your heart, your soul. Like, how, for me, food is an opportunity to connect ourselves to our body, connect ourselves to the food, and that food connects us to the earth. Like, for me, it's like this whole beautiful thing. And for me as a dietitian, like, of course I knew the calories and everything, and it was just a reflex, and it took me some time I had to unlearn. Like, sometimes the path to growing and healing is about unlearning a lot of things. And now I can look at food and it's like, I've practiced like removing numbers and the labels so many times, and just coming back over and over again to how it feels in my body. Like, does this food feel nourishing? But it's just the culture that we live in. It feels, I remember having this thought in my head years ago, like, I wish I had like just a little screen in my body that could tell me like, I'm at that amount of calories, and then you have that many calories left, like, because I would do the calculation and use the app, and I knew that it was not, I thought my metabolism, there was something wrong with my metabolism. But if my body could tell me, okay, you can have 50 or I don't know, 335 calories more today, then, I would know what to do, but
yeah, right. Because
it's so interesting. But yeah, it's not about numbers, and it changes from one day to another. And yeah, I know it feels scary to because it feels like if we're trusting our body that we're just going to walk with blindfolds on, but actually there's our body knows so much more than we think, and that we give it credit for.
And it's like, I mean, we were talking before we started recording about the squirrels, right? And it's like a squirrel doesn't count calories. And come wintertime, squirrels are not like, oh man, I put on some weight. The squirrels are like, awesome, like I need this. And there's this like greater like long game of nature doing its thing. And there's not a lot of squirrels binge eating. I mean, they, not a lot of squirrels.
It's part of their natural cycle. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. They just follow what they intuitively need, and they move. That's another thing too, actually, movement and how we will override, so this idea of motivation. So many people are like, oh, like I really just don't want to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And we're curious about that with like, well, I mean, there is this, like, if you watch a child, kids are moving spontaneously and they're restless. And but if you force this kid to go and work out for however many minutes, or if the kid was tired and overstressed, they'd be like, I don't want to, right? Like, so this sense of our body just being like, I don't really want to go and lift weights or run on a treadmill, or maybe it doesn't need that right now, so there's questions of like allowing movement to arise spontaneously.
And that's interesting because kids, what do we do with them? We put them in school where they have to sit and where they want to move. And we said, no, you cannot move. You have to sit through that whole class or whatever. And that's how, there's many different ways that we can become disconnected from our body. And that can be one way too. And I've seen it can go on both sides of the spectrum, people that are over exercising and overriding their body needs for rest, and others that just feel, they're just have a hard time getting the motivation. And it can even be for people that have tried losing weight or changing the size of their body for a long time. They can even be some kind of trauma formed around exercising and going to the gym, because it has been such so many awful experiences, and always usually very disconnected from the body. And it's just like something to check on the list. It's not about how you feel. It's really about burning those calories. And it's a very like, while you do it, you're listening to something, not your it could be a podcast. That would be really beautiful if it was the case. But yeah, sometimes you don't just sit, but watching TV or something to really not think about it, to not be in the body while you do it, so you can just be done with it. And it's
right. So it's like, if you're listening to this while on a treadmill right now, just check in with your body.
Remember.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so maybe talk about like other ways of nourishment, right? Like, because I know you don't just focus on food. It's a whole, the totality of nourishment.
Yes. Yeah. So I can talk a little bit. Yeah. For the body, of course, food is part of it, but there's also hydration, and rest and sleep, which are different. I have a lot of people, women that I work with that are doing addicts, like they do, and it's really hard for them to sit like for even 2 minutes sometimes. So the rest and having permission to do nothing. So rest, sleep, and movement in a more embodied form, as opposed to exercise, quote unquote exercise, is much more nourishing for the body. And again, it could look the same from the outside, but it's really about what's happening on the inside, the inner motivation, and how it feels for you to be in that experience. And for the mind, what I feel is usually the most important nutrients that most people are lacking of to nourish their mind is spaciousness. We're just live in this world of busyness, of going from one thing to the other. And just having a bit of spaciousness in our schedule between our thoughts, or slowing down. I think that, and the breath, very nourishing for the mind, and just looking at our self-talk and the way we talk to ourselves and those beliefs. And sometimes, the best diet we can go on is, looking at those beliefs and weeding those beliefs, and even like curating the type of information. I don't know if it's really information, but like when you look at social media, like what gets into our feed on Facebook or Instagram, like that's all part of the thoughts that you feed to your mind. So looking at all of that, and with the heart on the emotional level, what is really nourishing is connection. And I feel like so many of the people I work with feel really lonely. Like they may have a lot of friends sometimes, but still having the ability to have heart-to-heart connection when they can feel safe to be truly seen and heard, and they're being able to be met where they are and being able to be fully themselves. And they can be also at the heart level some inner child work and a lot of old wounds that need healing. And gratitude is another very, very beautiful nutrient for the heart, and compassion. So again, like I said, that it's so easy for us to be disconnected from our body. It's also very easy for us to be disconnected from our heart because we haven't been taught how our heart works. And sometimes it has felt unsafe to feel. So that's why, we unplug and we go binge watch something on Netflix, or we binge eat something in the kitchen. Like we just try to numb ourselves from that, but learning about different tools that makes it safer to feel a bit more is really important for the heart, because the heart needs to feel just like the body needs to be embodied. And then for the soul nourishment to me is, it's not about, it can be about spiritual health, which doesn't have to do anything to do with religion. It can be, if people have a religion they're attached to, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. For people that don't like anything about the word spirituality, we can see the soul as the alignment of the body, mind, and heart. But if people are willing to look at it through the lens of spirituality, it can be really about joy. Joy is very, very nourishing for the soul, as well as beauty in everything. And it can be with being present. And another thing that I find is really hard in today's world is that a big part of nourishment is not only, okay, yes, I can notice beauty around me. Like I'm just looking around in my home. There's lots of plants and macrame and pretty things, but we need to receive it. It's one thing we don't take the time to really open ourselves to receiving. We just have that checklist. Okay, I can do the meditation, go to yoga, eat, however meals and snack, and okay, I notice beauty. This thing was joyful, but it's not how we need to really receive it, to feel it, to allow ourselves to be in it. And that, I think, is a practice in and of itself for many reasons. And I'm still practicing, giving myself permission to receive. And because we're so taught that our value, our worth is in the doing and what it looks like on the outside, but it's really constantly coming back to within, how it feels within us. Because at the end, if we think about, our last day on our deathbed, not to be too dark here, but what will you remember? What will you remember about, those times where you didn't do this and that? No, you remember how you felt and how, the person that you've been. It's not so much about, the thing about our career that you didn't get the promotion or whatever. Like it will be probably more about things that are really, really aligned with your value, with your love, the amount of freedom that you are able to feel, and all of these things. So nourishment can go, can be very deep and encompass a lot of different things at once.
Right. It's like, you're not going to remember everyone's going to be checking out my MyFitnessPal and chronometer and figuring out that I was always
working medal or something.
Yeah, exactly. I was hit my nutrient targets or whatever. You're going to remember that moment that you stood on top of a mountain and took it in, took in the view and felt it, or the relationships that you really were like present for. And it's beautiful, right? Because it's, when we think of nourishment, one thing that's coming to mind was, it's not just the taking in of something, whether it be a thought or a food, it's the allowing it to be digested and incorporated into our being. Yeah. And that's really what nourishes. That's what like allows us to be filled.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You said it. Yeah, I love it. The digestion, and yeah, that's so perfect.
And it's like, you know, there's so many things to do with like, you know, with developing a relationship with things, with the images. And we talk about in another podcast, the lawful and unlawful images. So this idea of like a Dorito sort of like gives you salt and gives you sugar, and it kind of triggers this like a dopamine hit, and it feels like this, it's like, it's kind of overriding what our body seeks those things, because those things are symbols of nourishment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then same with the Instagram feed, right? That sort of triggers, oh, there, you know, the sense of reverence and awe we might get in when looking at nature, but often like there's this emptiness or this addictive quality to those images, and
Mm-hmm.
and that we can develop this relationship, and those images can make us feel really bad as well, right?
Yes. A lot of
And
comparison.
like the
Yeah.
comparison and the self-judgment and like whatever.
Mm.
And that in the relationship with like actually like, okay, what, you know, breathing in the image, and once you breathe it in, just as maybe you really taste the Dorito or the Cheeto, you're like, it's not that good, you know, maybe it's delicious for you, and that's great then, right? Just like the yoga feed on Instagram could also be super nourishing, but it's really about that curiosity of like, what does this taste like? What does this
For
feel like
you.
when I'm taking it in?
Exactly.
Like fully taking it in and feeling that, you know, and letting it not just trigger those dopamine hits, but like, what are the qualities of this thing that I'm consuming, and allowing it to be digested and incorporated, and then being curious about what that feels like.
Yeah. So really, I feel like the word embodiment really comes to me, like going through life, having an embodied experience of life where, you can really take it in and feel it. And it just goes deeper. And for a lot of people, I feel like when they're in this back and forth, and there's this storm of thoughts in their mind, like usually what I tell them to do is to take a deep breath and breathe themselves down into their heart or their body, because there's we feel so much more grounded. And of course it's a practice, and if you haven't been doing that very much, it will take some practice, but as with everything, practice makes progress. So
yes, not perfect, that's never a thing.
Exactly, we're not aiming for perfection. That doesn't mean anything anyway. So being embodied. Because I think it just make me think about spirituality, because I was talking a little bit about that just a moment ago. And I think that in some circles, spirituality is about transcending the body, but for me it's really much about being one, like in the body, and to have a very embodied experience of life, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and the body is part of the human experience. So might as well make peace with it and feel the freedom of having this physical body that allows us to be here on earth.
Right. Is it, fully like inhabiting it as a home for this lifetime.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I was saying, you know, I remember being a kid. This is a very maybe dark thing to say, but I remember being a kid and wondering, like, why did I have to be in this body? And again, like, that is not recognizing my privilege as an able-bodied person, you know,
right.
But in all the things, all the ways that I'm privileged. But I remember as a kid just having that thought, like wanting to be or experience someone else's body, perhaps thinking that person has a better experience of being alive. And that's maybe where comparison comes from, or this sense of like trying to disassociate from our bodies, because I don't know, so many things, society telling us that it doesn't look right, or it isn't right.
I mean, these ads on TV that we all saw as kids, like with the women looking a specific way, and when they had that specific body, they looked so happy and their life looked like so perfect or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they don't suffer in the ways that we suffer as humans on this planet. Like, you know, being thin means that you won't ever feel lonely or an existential crisis or whatever it is.
You would get the perfect boyfriend, and then, or whatever the ad was about. But
and that relationship will be perfect, and there'll be no issues within it, right? Because you both look good. So many things, and then, but also this feeling, you know, when we you know, our physical bodies do suffer. They feel pain, and they feel emotional pain, physical pain, discomfort, and you know, part of embodiment can be really scary. because we can actually start to meet those feelings head on and really feel them. And like you said, so many people have trauma. You mentioned it around movement, but or exercise more specifically than movement, but we can also have trauma within the body. And so there's so much there, you know?
Yes. Yeah. That we'd rather, disconnect from, but yeah, this is not black or white, and just one little step at a time, learning to come back to the body. And even though there might have been traumatic things that have happened, I think is part of the healing journey. And as scary as it may sound, it will, I know that it can just bring more freedom, bring more love. Even like, I think that when we're very much in our head, it's really hard to be able to receive love. And I've seen also that in so many people, is that they, no matter how amazing their life look from the outside, like it's just if they stay in their head, they're not able to come down in the heart and the body to be able to feel the love. And I really want everybody to be able to be connected to their heart so that it can feel all the love there is to feel. Yeah. Not saying that it becomes all rainbows and unicorns. I cannot bypassing any of that, but I think that, there's a lot to gain and to learn from that journey.
Yeah. Rainbows, unicorns, some grief, some sadness, some loneliness, a bunch of stuff in the heart.
Yeah, exactly. It's not boring. Yeah.
You're definitely not boring. Exactly.
I often talk to my friend. She does a lot of work like on personal growth, and we say like, we don't need Netflix. We all have our own. We have our own. So much happening within.
Right. Well, Netflix gains its inspiration from the human condition, right? So it's like,
it's a mirror. Yeah.
It's like you've got every movie that was ever made exists within the heart center. We'll let people digest that thought.
Wow.
Just come up with these things. Aglaée, do you have any last thoughts or things you want to finish off with?
It's been an amazing conversation. I love talking about all of these things with you. I love the insight you brought. And I just think that the last words that come to mind is, connecting to the body and embodiment. And it's really, to me, I see food, the body, as kind of a portal that can bring more healing, that can bring more growth, more expansion, more love, freedom, and also more connection, not only within ourselves, but with the people around us. Because the quality of the connection that I have with the people around me with new people or other people that were already in my life has completely changed. And also a connection to our food, the earth, like even like the agricultural system and like the way society works. Like I just feel like, sometimes we think like the body, our food may be more superficial, but there's a lot of depth and it can connect. And there's this beautiful web that can, take us wherever it is that we're meant to be taken, but that can, opens a lot of doors for us. So it's a beautiful portal to take.
Yeah, it's like any portal we can take, and this is a good one to start with. Something we gotta
that feels right. Yeah.
It's like in The Simpsons. The Simpsons, Homer's like, a dog this nice, you gotta feed every day. Same thing with the body. Yeah.
I love it.
Where can we find you, Aglaée?
So the best way is Radicata Nutrition. That's spelled Radicata. Nutrition. Radicata comes from Latin and mean roots. So radicatanutrition.com is my website, or on Instagram at Radicata Nutrition. So that's the best way to find me.
Right, perfect. And we'll leave those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining. This was an awesome combo.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye, Aglaée.